Well, I think this is one of those questions that falls into those categories which we usually slot under apparent contradictions, where we read in one verse something and then we read a bit later on in the narrative the same sort of thing that seems to be applying to the same event, but not necessarily is, and hopefully we're going to clear that up for you. I think it's probably best if we do start looking at both of those references. So if we go to the 1 Samuel 17 and verse 50, 1 Samuel 17 verse 50, we read the account of what we call, we're very familiar with it. So David prevailed over the Philistines with a sling and a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. There was no sword in the hand of David. Then David ran, stood over the Philistine, and took his sword and drew it out of his sheath and killed him and cut off his head. We know the story. It goes on to say how he defeated Goliath, who was a Gittite. Now then, if we go to the second narrative here, which has been brought to our attention, Samuel 21 verse 19, we're presented with a slight dilemma, because we have in chapter 21 and verse 19, 2 Samuel, 21 verse 19, we're going at verse 18. After this there was war again with the Philistines at Gob, and Sibeachai the Hushathite struck down Saph, who was one of the descendants of the giants. Carrying on. And there was war again with the Philistines at Gob, and Elhanan, so we've got two wars now. Elhanan, the son of Jah-Origim, the Bethlehemite, struck down Goliath the Gittite. So there we've got Goliath again. Goliath the Gittite. Gittite simply means one who comes from Gath. So it's a general term. And in fact, Goliath can become a general term as well. A bit like the kings and the pharaohs. Pharaoh was a title for a king over Egypt. And Goliath was that kind of name. It wasn't necessarily a name. It could be a title, one who was big and strong and mighty. Now, there is a corresponding chapter for this. So if we go to the 1st of Chronicles and chapter 20, because this is broken down for us a little bit more. The 1st of Chronicles, chapter 20. And we'll actually start at verse 1, because it sets the scene for us. It gives us very important information. It says here, in the spring of the year, the time when the kings go out to battle, Joab led out the army and ravaged the country of the Ammonites and came and besieged Rabbah. But David remained at Jerusalem. So we're talking about a time now when David is king. Okay. Joab's gone out and he's fighting the king's battles at the times when the kings normally go out to battle. Now if we go over to verse 5, actually verse 4, and after this there arose war with the Philistines at Gezer. Then Sibeachai, we read of him in the 1st of Samuel, the Hushite, struck down Sibeachai, who was one of the descendants of the giants. So we've got another giant going on here. And the Philistines were subdued. And then the verse we're looking for, verse 5, and there was again war with the Philistines, and Elhanan, the son of Jair, struck down Lahmi, the brother of Goliath the Gittite, the shaft of whose spear was like a weaver's beam. And that phrase keeps cropping up, doesn't it? Whenever we refer to the giants, we always seem to get that phrase, the staff of whose spear was like a weaver's beam. There are other versions, and they translate them differently. The Net version translated, there was another battle with the Philistines in which Elhanan, the son of Jair, the Bethlehemite, killed the brother of Goliath the Gittite. So now we're told something else. We're told that he was the brother of Goliath, the shaft of whose spear was like a weaver's beam. There is a suggestion that Lahmi there, Lahmi, is a textual corruption of the word Bethlehemite. And this is obviously referring to the same incident in the 2nd of Samuel 21 verse 19. So from here we can see that Goliath had a brother. And it just so happens that whether we accept that Goliath is a name or whether we consider it as a title, we have to assume that Goliath, the Goliath mentioned here and the Goliath mentioned in the 1st of Samuel were brothers. So we know at least that he had a brother, and it's Elhanan that is killing the brother of Goliath because of the time set. It's much later on. It's when David has been made king, so it's much later than the 1st of Samuel, when David was just a boy and he went and stood before the army of the Philistines. So that does clear that up. There is something else which I discovered for the first time, which I hadn't really considered. This is really the thought that I wanted to leave you with. That there is a suggestion that apart from Goliath, there was the other Goliath. So we've got Goliath and Goliath, Ishbi-Benob and Saph, and then somebody identified as a man of great stature who had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in number, 2 Samuel 21, verse 15 to 22. So we're not given his name, but we're told that all these were descended from the giants. The suggestion is, and I think it's quite a beautiful suggestion, is why did David pick up 5 stones? It's often been said that he picked up 5 stones because it was the number of grace, and he understood the numbers because the number in Hebrew means exactly that, grace. But picking up on these thoughts, if there were 5 of these brothers, it may well be that when David stepped out and he picked up those 5 stones, he may well have known and seen the 5 giants in the Philistine army. And he was well prepared to take on all 5 of them, 1 stone for each of them, which I'd never really considered before, but I think it's a wonderful demonstration of, if it's true, of David's faith and his courage when presented with that Philistine army standing before him, that he was well prepared to take on Goliath and his 4 brethren, or certainly relations. And I just thought that was a wonderful little insight into the mind of David.